Hello, welcome back to Lush Tongue, Sound Meditation, and more. I am your host, Aname, and let us start our experience with a series of ohms, which you can chant along in unison or in harmony, or you can create your own special improvisation. Here we go. All right, now that we've given ourselves a sonic and energetic massage through sound, through our voices, let us jump right into letting you know that if you'd like to make a contribution to Lush Tongue, you can do so via Venmo, via Cashapp, via PayPal. All the links are in the description. And I have a newsletter that I send out on Tuesdays. And if you'd like to get it on that newsletter, so you can find out the latest events and insights that I share, you can click the link in the description. And if you have any direct inquiries to send to me about how I may be of service, primarily to groups of people who are looking to have creative fellowship where they're witnessing and amplifying each other's creativity and innovation and just opening up possibility um, for resolving conflict, building greater collaboration, team building, community building, all things building through the power of sound, of unified sound. You can send inquiries to lushtongue@gmail.com. I love facilitating workshops. It's what I do in person. And for the past several months, is what I've been doing online, pivoting into a more online framework. Um, Indefinitely. And I think it's going to continue to be an ongoing part of my package of offerings, even beyond once the outside world opens up in full again. All right, so I think that covers my announcements. Um, oh yeah, if you have young kids who are into singing, you can send them my way via OutSchool. The link is in the description. Yeah. Okay. So I made a post on Instagram a while back about, lessons from 2020. Some were, uh, profound insights, and some were a bit more on the levity side. So there are three more of those lessons that I'd like to expound on. So the last episode I focused on three. And for this last episode of 2020, I'm focusing on three more lessons that I think are important, that I think you will get a lot of value out of thinking about and, noticing how it applies in your life and how you might choose to apply it going forward. So, one idea I want to tease out that I actually explored more in depth this past weekend, this past holiday weekend that I spent with my family, and my younger brother and I, we have this uh, really fun dynamic of going down various rabbit holes together on YouTube, and thinking about this idea of the flow of giving and receiving, we came across several disturbing um, phenomena that exist in the world. One was a phenomenon that I'd heard about years ago, but it came up in conversation, so I, looked at it a little more in depth. And it's this phenomenon of so every year, the major car manufacturers, they build, X number of cars, X thousand number of cars, and by the end of the year, and all your friends who are hardcore into like car salespersonship will tell you this, that the end of the year, or maybe even like the very beginning of the following year, is the best time price wise to purchase a car, because they're trying to like get rid of their um end of year inventory to make room for the new cars that are coming in. But here's what's been happening for the past several years. End of the year, beginning of the new year, those unsold cars of the previous model year, a few of them, go to used car lots. A few of them even go to auction. Um, Far fewer than I thought go to, like, be destroyed or crushed and recycled for scrap metal. A good chunk of those cars go into what's called a car graveyard or car cemetery. There are these huge lots of cars in perfect condition that were not sold in the model year that they were manufactured, and so they sit unused forevermore. They're just sitting in these huge lots all over um, the United States, Europe, Asia, and possibly other parts of the world. But they're these car graveyards full of unused cars. The people who work at at the factories who built the cars, they get to purchase the cars that they built at a discount. Like those leftover cars that would otherwise go to the graveyard, they then get an opportunity, I guess, at the end of the year or at the end of the manufacturing season, for them to then purchase a car at a steep discount. Um, but even after that, there's still a lot of cars that just sit in these car graveyards. Same thing happens with, or similar dynamic happens with bicycles. There are so many bicycles sitting in bicycle graveyards, plural, in China. So China is the biggest manufacturer of bicycles, and so many that they have, bikes that are abandoned or stolen or just never sold. Um, and I guess they don't, like, find a viable market for those perfectly working bicycles, and so they languish in the bicycle graveyards. And then, as we see this dynamic again with food, so anyone who has ever worked in catering, or anyone who has ever worked on a movie set, or anyone who has ever worked as a chef in any capacity, you know exactly how much food gets wasted. Oh, but wait, even before we get to the food that is distributed to restaurants and grocery stores and huge events that require a lot of food, movie sets, before the food even gets to those distribution points, um, grocery stores, before the food even gets to the grocery store, technically, and the events that are catered, and your dinner table, etc. There is so much food, perfectly good food, perfectly healthy food, that is trashed before it ever makes it to the grocery store. An insane amount of food gets trashed. And then, of course, there's the food from the catered events and from the movie sets and from the restaurants that also gets trashed. at alarming rates. Now, what do these three different phenomena have in common? The car graveyards, the bicycle graveyards, the food waste. These phenomena exist in a world where there are people who get their cars stolen all the time, people who get their bicycles stolen all the time, and people who are starving, which is a much more serious issue than, a stolen car or a stolen bike, in case that's not obvious. But the dynamic is the same, that we live in this world where there's this extreme imbalance on both ends of the spectrum. There's all this waste and inefficiency over here of land that is being um, used to hold cars and bicycles that could be out on the road somewhere transporting people, but instead they're just sitting there going to waste in perfect condition. It's so maddening. And then you have all this food that goes to waste in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of so many people who are starving, so many people who live in areas that are food deserts where they don't have immediate access to healthy food. Many a farmer can tell you that they have such a surplus. Many farmers have such a surplus at the end of the harvest season that they're just like giving the food away. Just like, come to my farm. Go to a farm in October, November in North America, and you will leave with with enough food to last you the winter. you know, there's just so much food. It makes absolutely no sense that from I guess I'd call it a metaphysical perspective, thinking about timelines, the idea of people occupying the same uh, time on Earth, but having such radically different experiences. So you have this person over here, going back to the car example, who may have his or her car stolen, and maybe they had to work really hard to raise the money to purchase that car, and now it's still is gone. It's already on a barge headed headed somewhere else in the world, and now they have to deal with that loss and that feeling of scarcity of like, how will I ever replace that? That was the thing that got me to and from work. Maybe that person who had their car stolen was an essential worker, so they actually had to commute to get to where they needed to be. Maybe they're not in a position where they can work from home. So now they're dealing with that loss and that scarcity. Meanwhile, there are lots full of thousands of unused cars in perfect condition. And so many thoughts came to me as I was reading about these different phenomena. First of all, the person or the people who are able to come up with an efficient way to bring use value to those cars and the car graveyards, who are able to bring use value to the bicycles and the bicycle graveyards, the people who are able to somehow get the food that would have the perfectly good healthy food that would have gone into a landfill and get that to people who need it the most. Whoever is able to like engineer that, whoever has that particular gift for being able to disrupt these systems of waste and like redistribute all that wealth that's just sitting in those lots, that's sitting in those bicycle graveyards, it's sitting in the landfills, figure out a way to like redistribute that. One, that person will become very rich if they're not already. And two, um I'm really excited for this decade that we are stepping into, because I foresee that this is where a lot of our this is where there's going to be a lot of focus. There's a lot of talk about renewables in the sense of dealing with climate change and cars switching from gas which is in many ways, not the most sustainable kind of fuel to be using for cars, and switching to, you know, renewable, more renewable types of fuel, like the sun, like water, etc. Um, and I see more of that consciousness filtering out to these different areas of life where we can all collectively increase our quality of life by learning how to collectively tune in to a healthier flow of giving and receiving. Because nobody's giving or receiving any value from those cars sitting in those lots, except maybe if there's somebody who owns that lot who's renting that space out. But there's a much they're much more useful uses. They're much more valuable uses for that land. They're much more valuable uses for those cars and those bicycles. Um, I, for one, am a big fan of the idea of like retrofitting all the cars that currently exist with renewable fuel sources. Like rather than waiting until 2030 and I didn't anticipate being on such a soapbox about this because there's actually somewhere deeper I'm going metaphysically speaking about the flow of giving and receiving. But like these concrete examples of phenomena that exist right now that are so in need of change right now. I'm not necessarily the one that has that particular kind of analytical engineering mind that can see concretely the possibility of how to get the food that would have otherwise gone to waste to the people who are starving, or the bicycles that are sitting there unused, like getting them to the people who would most benefit from having those bicycles. The cars that are sitting there, retrofitting them all with electricity or solar power or water power, and yet, putting those on the road, um, and like slowly bringing on. Speaking of planned obsolescence, like bringing the obsolescence to the fossil fuel, and ushering this healthier phenomenon for the earth. Um, So, how this all relates to me with the flow of giving and receiving is this notion that when you get to a certain level, when you are at a certain level of abundance and you're surrounded by people who are at a certain level of abundance, giving and receiving can become easy. Like there's a sense of safety, a sense of emotional and psychological safety that, okay, I don't have to do tit for tat because I'm surrounded by people who value reciprocity as much as I do. So we can kind of take it for granted, if you will, or take it as a given, given and receiving. Take it as a given that you treat that person to lunch here and there, and they treat you to whatever it is that speaks to your love language, and you just kind of have this ease and flow and grace in how you give and receive to each other. And and in that flow, in which all the people within that flow are committed to embodying a generosity of spirit, it really makes things easier. Like like there's a such a an exhale, a feeling of, yeah, I can just lean back and trust and give from my heart with no ulterior motive other than the joy of giving. Now, where there's that lack of safety is when someone in your sphere, who will probably end up no longer being in your sphere, um, when there isn't that balance amongst all the people, sharing that flow together. Like when one person falls out of the flow, everybody else feels the imbalance. And I see that how that dynamic plays out on a global scale, and I also see how that dynamic plays out locally. In the micro. If you've ever been at a group dinner, and I've been this person, I've been on both sides of this, where Everybody's doing well. Everybody's, reveling in their success, and you're getting the most expensive things on the menu. But maybe there's one person there who's like fronting, and maybe they're not doing as well as everybody else, but they're too ashamed to mention it. So they're like, okay, I'll just get an appetizer. I'll just hang back. And then the check comes, and when everybody's just in the flow of giving and receiving, you're just like, okay, just split it even. Everybody put in $200 and you're done. And then meanwhile, the person, and I've been that person who does not have $200 in um in my bank account in that particular moment to be able to indulge in that group dinner in the way that the more high rolling friends may be able to. Suddenly I feel this tightness and this contraction and this shame of like, I really shouldn't have come to this dinner at all because I can't hang. I'm not in the same flow. I'm not able to give and receive at the level of the other people at this table. And when the check comes, that's the moment I admit it to myself. um, so that's a very easy example to point to of what that imbalance does for, well, the person who's directly feeling that imbalance as far as feeling like you don't have as much as the others around you. And then for the folks who do have, it can also create a lot of weirdness, awkwardness, guilt, resentment. There's so much that can get triggered when there's an imbalance in the flow of giving and receiving. Um, Similar to the cars and bicycles and the food. So I say all that to say that in this coming year, check in with yourself about uh, what I'm actually about to step into with the second topic. Check in with yourself about your energetic budget. And your energetic budget, of course, encompasses the financial, and encompasses what you value. It encompasses how much time you spend on what you value, how you embody what you value by actually spending time on it, by giving it form, by giving it space in your life, by acknowledging, uh, you know, this this particular uh, dinner party or virtual dinner party, as it were, with this group of people. It's not my energetic budget. Or being involved in this event, that's in my energetic budget. Or, I would like to expand my budget to be in the flow of giving and receiving on a higher level, on a larger level, in a with a larger scope. So tracking your energetic budget. Where am I spending my energy? How would I like to spend my energy? What reaps the greatest return on my energy? What is a deposit I can make every day? What are the biggest withdrawals on my energetic budget? These are great questions to ask yourself. Um, Really anytime, but particularly at the top of the year, just like check in with yourself. How do I fill my cup? How do I enrich my energetic budget? Because the energetic budget precedes the financial budget, the emotional budget, and the physical budget. How much am I moving? How much am I sitting at this computer every day? How would I like to be spending my life force energy? How would I like to move? Um, and exercise, yoga, singing, etc. Um, and it's in being in touch with your own energetic budget that allows you to step more deeply into your flow of giving and receiving. And that brings me to my third topic, which is the proverbial shoe dropping. So, many of you have heard this figure of speech, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And what does that mean? So, it's a figure of speech that relates to the idea that anyone who's ever dealt with anxiety can relate to, which is the notion of foreboding, often connected to, like, if things are going well, it's kind of a foreboding joy. If things are going well, Oh, something around the bend is coming to bring things back to balance because, you can never feel too good. So many of us are socialized or have been conditioned to feel like there's always going to be a shoe that drops. Um, a shoe representing some kind of crisis, some kind of drama, some kind of, oh, here we go again, some kind of source of frustration. And it's often the dread of that shoe dropping that can be worse than the actual shoe that drops. And I believe this figure of speech came about as, I can tell you straight up. Um, I remember hearing about it in the context of like in apartment buildings with the thin walls and the thin floors. Um, this notion of like hearing the neighbor above you coming home, and you hear their shoes dropping as they take off their shoes. Um, and so if you don't hear two shoes dropping, then maybe your upstairs neighbor died. Let's see. Let's see um, what the actual. Okay. Oh, wait. Dictionary.com. Oh, wait. A seemingly inevitable event. As in now she has a good enough job to leave her husband. We're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. This expression alludes to a person awakened by a neighbor who loudly dropped one shoe on the floor and is waiting for the second shoe to be dropped. Okay. Okay. Thankfully, it doesn't involve a dead neighbor. That's good to know. my my macabre humor. Um, okay. So if something is genuinely inevitable and it's something, negative that you'd rather not face, I'm finding that it's actually healthier for our life force to just let it drop, to just acknowledge that it's dropping, to just accept that it drops. That takes that discharges that anxious waiting energy. Um, and it's good to get into the practice of, well, there's a few different practices you can test out and see what really works for you, as far as learning to accept um that a shoe is going to drop, uh or that it's not, but either way you still move forward. Or, as I like to put it, the way I phrased it in my Instagram post, which I will have the link in the description as well. Let's see. Where do I have it? Oh, here we go. If you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, let it drop. Put on that pair, dance, and move forward. So I take that as a metaphor for alchemy. Like, instead of directing all that energy and all that emotional charge um, into the often familiar feeling of anxiety. Like, when is it going to drop? How's it going to drop? Is it going to drop on my head? Is it going to kick me in the face? Like, pouring that energy back into yourself and redirecting it by alchemizing that emotional charge. What would you like to have happen if that shoe in fact drops? What is the worst case scenario, and how can you use that worst case scenario to your benefit? How can you if that worst case scenario actually happens, then what are like three different things you can do? What are three different ways you can pivot from that dropped shoe? And that, like, takes the sting and the fear, that can help take the sting and the fear out of that dropped shoe, whatever the shoe means for you. um the dropped shoe, it could be as intense as, like, oh, fear about uh, a loved one who has an illness, fear of your business going under. It can be like serious hardcore stuff. And yet, in the midst of this serious hardcore stuff that may be probable or even inevitable, life is still happening. And, a lot of energy gets siphoned off with waiting for that shoe to drop. Um, Fear about that shoe dropping, fear that you won't be able to get back up after the shoe drops on your head. Um, Once you acknowledge those emotions, acknowledge the anxiety, acknowledge the fear, acknowledge the worst possible scenario. If the shoe has like spikes on it and stabs you in the face. Worst case scenario. And then imagine yourself actually climbing out of the crisis. Imagine you actually reaching a new um, level as a result of going through that crisis, like actually facing it head on as if it's a dragon and you're slaying it. And you're not only slaying it, but you're actually envisioning different ways of slaying it. Like you're you're doing the kind of not counterintuitive, but like when our brain is in crisis mode, it's natural to actually go into tunnel vision and be stuck in that story that creates the anxiety and creates the fear. So actually training yourself to imagine possibilities beyond or after, the aftermath of the shoe dropping. Envision yourself coming out of it. That trains your mind to be able to snap out of the tunnel vision and into the expanded vision. And when you're able to step into that expanded sense of possibility, that even with the worst happening, still you rise, still you can rise. And not only can you rise, but there's different possibilities of how you can rise. That does so much for for the direction of your life force. That, like, any shoe that could be thrown at you, you can still like spin it into gold to mix up all my metaphors. So yeah, let the shoe drop. And letting the shoe drop, obviously, it doesn't mean that if there is any action you can take to stop the shoe drop, that you don't take that. Still go ahead and take the action. But the idea here is to snatch the emotional charge from it. And when you can approach the problem solving, the prevention of the shoe dropping from a more emotionally neutral and detached space, again, that allows your mind to remain in an expansive place as opposed to that more tunnel visioned, anxiety ridden place. So that's the big three there. Um, to reiterate, we've got the flow of giving and receiving. Be in it as much as possible. Be in that flow of giving and receiving to where they become one and the same. Like the more you give, the more you receive that deep feeling of abundance within you, that you have so much to give. And giving from that place of a full cup by first giving to yourself. All those cliches: pay yourself first, fill your own cup, love yourself. I'm really starting to understand now what that actually means, beyond the kind of surface level platitude. Like, it's really become crucial for me to give to myself every day. I meditate every day. I have time to myself to just check in with myself every day, to check in with my energetic budget, which brings me to number two: track your energetic budget. Be in tune with yourself, check in with yourself constantly, um, about where you're spending your budget, uh, and how you would like to spend your budget. I'm a big fan of this show, This Is Us, and in This Is Us, there's this group of triplets, very unusual triplets, and they call themselves the Big Three, and they have their Big Three chant, and that inspires me to look at my energetic budget every day in terms of my big three. Like, what are the three most important things I want to accomplish today that would really fill my cup, that would fill my energetic budget? What are the three goals, the three tasks, um, the three actions, the three inspired actions I'm taking every day? And then, everything else on my to-do list is a bonus, but as long as the big 3 gets done, I'm good. Um, and then lastly, in times of impending crisis or impending drama, and if you know yourself to be the kind of person who gets caught up in the anxiety of, like, when is that shoe dropping? How is it going to drop? What's the worst that's going to happen? Is it going to annihilate me and my sense of self? Um, you know, Confront it, face it head on, let the shoe drop. Take your power back from that dropping shoe. And this last one about letting the shoe drop is very much inspired by a book called Existential Kink. I am so in love with that book right now. Um, and I share some insights about that book in my Facebook group, Soul Insights, and that link will be in the description. Um, yeah. Okay. So that's the big three more important lessons of 2020, and happy holidays, and I will see you all next year on the next Tuesday. All right. So with that, let's close out with Om. All right, this is Lush Tongue, sound meditation, and more. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, all those things. And I'll see you again soon. Stay lush. Bye.